It starts with a single step, not towards something, but away from everything. Imagine waking up one morning with a strange pressure inside your chest. Your room feels unfamiliar. Your street suddenly feels wrong. Your life, the job, the people, the routine, feels like a cage closing in. And then something inside your mind whispers, leave. No plan, no destination, just an overwhelming urge to walk and keep walking. You pass your neighborhood, then your city, then entire countries. Days later, someone finds you hundreds of miles away, exhausted, confused, and unable to explain a single step that brought you there. You didn't run from danger. You walked straight into it. In the late 1800s, doctors began documenting people who suddenly abandoned their lives and wandered across continents without warning. They weren't criminals, they weren't explorers, and they weren't fully aware of what they were doing. Psychiatrists eventually gave this strange phenomenon a name: Dromomania, a psychological condition where a person experiences an uncontrollable urge to wander, sometimes for thousands of miles, with little memory of why they left or how they arrived. But the real mystery isn't the walking. It's the question that terrified doctors for decades. Why does the human mind suddenly decide to escape itself? Segment 1. The Man Who Walked Across Europe. In 1886, a quiet gas fitter from Bordeaux named Jean Albert Dadas vanished. No warning, no goodbye. One day he was at work, tightening pipes and repairing gas lines like any ordinary laborer. His life was simple, predictable, the kind of life that rarely attracts attention. And then suddenly he was gone. The next day his coworkers noticed his absence. At first it didn't seem unusual. People miss work sometimes. But as the days passed, concern turned into confusion. Jean Albert had disappeared without leaving a single clue behind. Weeks later, authorities finally located him, but not in Bordeaux. He was found in another country, exhausted and disoriented. Officials assumed he had simply run away or traveled for work, so they sent him home. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Because months later it happened again. Jean Albert vanished without warning and reappeared in completely different places across Europe. Paris, Vienna, Prague, Brussels, sometimes hundreds of miles from where he started. The strangest part wasn't the distance, it was his memory. When questioned, Jean Albert insisted he had no recollection of the journeys. No trains, no roads, no decisions to leave. Entire weeks of travel had simply vanished from his mind. Doctors eventually began studying him closely. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. During these disappearances, Jean Albert entered a strange, trance-like state. His body functioned normally, walking, navigating cities, even interacting with strangers. But his conscious awareness seemed to disappear. He would travel obsessively, sometimes walking for days until his body collapsed from exhaustion. He wasn't exploring. He wasn't escaping. He was compelled, as if something deep inside his mind had taken control. And even more disturbing, Jean Albert Dadas wasn't the only one. By the late 19th century, doctors across France began reporting similar cases. Workers, soldiers, laborers, ordinary people suddenly abandoning their lives and wandering across entire regions of Europe. Some woke up in train stations. Some opened their eyes in unfamiliar cities. Some walked so long their feet bled through their shoes. And when doctors asked the most obvious question, "Why did you leave?" the answer was always the same. They didn't know. This wasn't simple wanderlust. It was something far darker. Because the mind wasn't just wandering. It was running away from itself. Segment 2. What Dromomania Does to the Brain. To understand Dromomania, we have to talk about something the brain is terrifyingly good at: escape. When your mind experiences overwhelming stress, trauma, or psychological conflict, it sometimes chooses a radical solution. It disconnects. Psychologists call this dissociation. In extreme cases, dissociation can cause people to feel detached from their identity, their surroundings, or even their own memories. Dromomania appears to be one of the most dramatic forms of this response. Instead of mentally escaping, the body escapes too. During these episodes, individuals often enter what experts describe as a fugue state. In this condition, they can walk, travel, and interact normally. They may buy train tickets, check into hotels, talk to strangers, but internally something critical is missing: their sense of self. It's as if the brain temporarily erases the person's identity to protect itself from psychological pain. Imagine your mind acting like an emergency shutdown system. Too much pressure, too much conflict, too much stress. So it hits a psychological reset button, but instead of shutting down, it sends you walking. And that's where the real danger begins. Because when someone enters a fugue state, their survival instincts often weaken. They walk through unfamiliar cities, cross dangerous areas, travel without food, money, or safety. Some wander into forests, others into crime-filled districts. Some simply collapse from exhaustion miles away from help. The brain is trying to escape danger, but in doing so, it sometimes leads the body directly into it. Segment 3. The soldier who became someone else. One of the most chilling cases occurred in 1887, a year after Jean Albert Dadas' infamous wanderings. This time it involved a French soldier named Jean-Louis. He was stationed at a modest military post, carrying out his duties like any other soldier. Then, almost overnight, he vanished. Days passed. Weeks. No trace. His comrades searched. Authorities investigated, but Jean-Louis had simply disappeared. There were no signs of foul play, no letters explaining his absence. Nothing. He had evaporated from the world he knew. Months later, a shocking discovery was made. Jean-Louis was found working in a small bakery in a distant town. But something was off. He had a new name, a new job, a completely new life. When the local authorities confronted him, he didn't recognize the accusations. They told him he was a missing soldier. He insisted they were wrong. In his mind, he had always lived in that small town, baking bread, interacting with locals, and performing a life that was not his own. Doctors who examined him uncovered the reason. Jean-Louis had entered a dissociative fugue, a rare and extreme psychological state. His mind had essentially erased his old identity and constructed a new one to replace it, a coping mechanism so powerful that he fully believed it was real. When the fugue ended, the collision of realities was devastating. He suddenly faced the truth, the past months of his life, the friends he made, the job he performed, the interactions he remembered, had all been experiences of a version of himself that never truly existed. Imagine waking up and realizing that 6 months of your life were fabricated by your own brain. This is the terrifying essence of Dromomania. It reveals an unsettling truth about the human mind. What feels like a fixed identity is far more fragile than we like to believe. Under extreme psychological pressure, the brain can rewrite the story of who you are, and sometimes it can make you live that story as though it were real. The twist in application. Now here's the part that makes this phenomenon deeply uncomfortable. You probably don't have Dromomania. Most people never will. But the psychological impulse behind it, that's something almost everyone has felt. Think about moments when life becomes overwhelming. The pressure, the responsibilities, the conflicts. Sometimes a thought quietly appears in the back of your mind. What if I just left? Not forever. Just disappeared for a while. Drove somewhere random. Turned off your phone. Ignored everything. That urge to escape isn't unusual. It's a basic psychological defense. Your brain trying to reduce stress by imagining distance from the problem. For most people, it stays a fantasy. But Dromomania shows what happens when that escape impulse stops being a thought and becomes a command. And that raises a disturbing possibility. If the human brain can erase memories, create new identities, and physically force someone to walk away from their life, what other hidden mechanisms are buried deep inside the mind, waiting to activate under the right conditions? Because there's another psychological phenomenon even stranger than Dromomania, a condition where people suddenly wake up speaking languages they've never learned, or claiming memories from lives they've never lived.